Good morning. Thank you. You're alive. It's another miracle. Y'all bow with me. Gracious and good Father, thank you for another day. Thank you for getting us through this week. Be with us today. It's going to be a long one. Let us do things that you approve of. And when we don't, thank you for forgiving us. Be with us, lead us, and guide us. Give us wisdom, character, and compassion. In my Savior's name I pray. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen on the wall, the only bills to be asked for are those that have not been asked for. If you've got a bill that you've already been to the front about, just forget about it. I don't want to hear those. I just want to hear the ones that we haven't heard. The Rules Committee needs to hear a very short explanation of those bills. Mr. Chokus.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On page 2, Modified Structured House Bill 84, it deals with the denial of a claim for aviation insurance. And simply put, what we plan on doing after the amendment is added is make bold lettering as to what the exclusions are so that the owners of the policy understand completely what they're buying. And then on page 4, Modified Structure House Bill 565, we are eliminating the Georgia Tobacco Community Development Board Overview Committee. I'm vice chairman of that committee. I talked with Penny Halstead and Richard Smith. They've been on that committee for 3 years as well. There are no Senate members to that committee. It doesn't do anything. We don't meet, so we just want to eliminate it. I ask for y'all's favorable consideration on that. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Oh, any questions? I'm sorry.
There are no questions. Thank you. Ms. Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of HB 452. It's in the middle of page 3. This will add no contact bond provisions in instances of like rape and child molestation where there's a no contact provision in the bond. It will just add that to the existing temporary protective order registry, make victims safer in the state of Georgia. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Which one was it?
HB 452. It's in the middle of page 3.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McCall. No. You go, Mandy.
Oh. Did you have questions?
No questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 475 is on page 3, about a third of the way up from the bottom. This is your and Chairman Burns' feral hog bill.
That's a real good bill.
That's what we all think, sir.
I'm positive there are no questions. Next.
I have one request, and I don't know how y'all do it. I would like, if you don't mind, for Senate Bill 139 to be sent back to Ag so we can do a little bit of tweak to it to get everybody happy with this thing.
Well, wait a minute. I want him to go ahead and explain it.
Explain which one, 475 or 139?
Well, you don't have to do nothing on 475. 139, just give the gist of that thing.
Do what, sir?
139, just give us
Oh, okay. 139 is an auxiliary container bill, and what it does is says that the us being the state are the only people that can come up with, the only entity that can come up with the different uses of styrofoam containers, plastic bags, paper bags. So we don't have a lot of dots all over the state of Georgia looking like California did. And in an effort to get some of the local governments happy, we need to send it back and do a little tweak to it, and I don't want to ask you to have to do it in rules.
He's asked for it to be moved back. Any opposition to that? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Raffensperger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have before you on page 3, modified structure in the middle of the page, HB 432. It concerns the creation of unincorporated islands are currently precluded by statute. There's a property owner that wants to de-annex from one area to be annexed into another area. It would be a friendly annexation and de-annexation. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Duncan, 152.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 2, under modified structure rule, House Bill 152. The media and many folks in the public have called this Michael's Law. It's important to me that it is not just about one tragedy. This is about a statewide problem. There was an 18-year-old college freshman that was beaten to death by a bouncer that lived in Forsyth County in Statesboro, Georgia. The following investigation led us to see that there was 71 citations against this particular establishment with not even an administrative hearing being heard. 102 ambulance trips to this location over the same 3-year period of time. What we found out is that there's a lack of communication between local authorities and also alcohol license holders to the Department of Revenue. This bill defines what a state definition for a bar would be, and these are these individuals or establishments that serve more than 75% of their annual revenue from alcohol would be defined as a bar, which is a very, very thin sliver of establishments. And what it says is that no longer will it be 18 to enter, 21 to drink. You must be 21 to enter these establishments of these extremely high volume alcohol sales locations. We increased the age of bouncers to 21 around the state, and we also require that these individuals or these establishments with these high alcohol sales, if they receive a citation, they're required to report to the Department of Revenue within 45 days. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, the bar you're talking about in Statesboro, is it still operational?
No, sir. It was actually shut down 6 days after the death occurred and opened up 6 weeks later in Clemson, South Carolina. It was a shell corporation that owned it.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions. Thank you. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May it please the committee. I'll bring to you House Bill 418, which is under modified structure, page 3, almost halfway down. This bill deals with grand jury restrictions. This bill would require that individuals with a criminal charge who are actively participating in an alternative prosecution program, such as a pretrial diversion program, first offender, or other accountability courts, be ineligible to serve on a grand jury while they are pending and active in that program.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reeves, can you explain why we would disallow those persons from participating in a grand jury?
Yes, ma'am. There are several reasons. The biggest reason is that there is an inherent conflict of interest in this. When a person is in a pretrial diversion program or they're in an accountability court, they are reporting directly to the district attorney's office while they're in that program. If they're under first offender treatment, then they're under the supervision of the court. And we believe that this pending status, while they're reporting directly to these authorities and then participating in the grand jury process, which the district attorney brings the cases to the grand jury, there's an inherent conflict of interest that frankly can cut both ways. That's the main reason. There are some other reasons as well, but that's the main reason.
Can you elaborate on the other reasons?
On the others? Yes, one of the other big problems is that while these accountability courts, diversion programs, and first offender treatment are great programs, the growth of these programs have been wonderful things. Many participants fail out and don't make it through these programs. And so if you've got a person that's in one of these programs serving on a grand jury and they don't do what they're supposed to do and they fail out, they're still on that grand jury, there could certainly be some inherent bias that works in from their perspective of maybe how they feel they shouldn't have failed out of the program. So that's another great reason. Also, particularly in light of drug courts, you have active participants in drug court, folks that come from a drug background. They're going through the grand jury process. You're subject, or you receive sensitive information about ongoing wiretap investigations and active drug investigations. So we also think that there is some compromise there with that information going to persons who are in that program.
Thank you.
Mr. Willard, I sure hope that your question doesn't take that much of an explanation.
It won't take long. Ms. Reeves, it's true, is it not, that people who are felons, convicted felons, are disallowed to be on a grand jury? Is that right? True. And these are people who have many times entered a plea of a felony charge, but because the state has allowed there to be a means of their clearing their name, they permit them to go into alternative programs such as first offender's plea and drug courts.
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
No more questions.
Thank you so much.
Praise the Lord. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is House Bill 417. It's about halfway down on page 3. This is a bill which will recognize rapid flash beacons for crosswalks currently in our code. You have a situation where the pedestrian is required to step out in front of oncoming vehicles before the vehicle is required to stop. In answer to that, a lot of communities put flashing beacons on crosswalks that can be pedestrian activated, and this just modernizes the code to recognize those and require vehicles to stop when they see the beacon in the crosswalk.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that you? No questions. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I bring you House Bill 409. It's on the third page, about a third of the way down. 409. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, today I bring you 409. This bill allows frozen cadaver skins to continue to be recognized and allowable treatment under health insurance policies in the state of Georgia. A few health insurance carriers have recently had policy changes that resulted in a decision to stop reimbursing physicians for skin grafting using a frozen cadaver skin, deeming it experimental. However, frozen cadaver skins have been used since 1903. It has already been FDA approved as a health insurance claims payer for over 35 years. We have always allowed this to be covered. In the 1960s, Medicare allowed these procedures as covered expense. At this time, no clinical trials are necessary to prove that this is a practice is effective. I ask for your favorable consideration for this bill.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brockway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill that's just arrived on your sheet today on the top of page 2 under modified open, House Bill 551. The bill's been changed a little bit since what you see there in the caption, and it only does one thing. It would allow state employees under the auspices of the Department of Administrative Services, they would handle this thing. It would allow them to purchase items and pay it back out of a deduction out of their paycheck. This would be administered by the Department of Administrative Services. These contracts would be signed with companies that do this sort of thing and would go through the normal bidding process. And this is completely voluntary. Employees could choose to purchase these items if they want to and choose not to if they choose not to. So that's the bill, and happy to answer any questions, sir.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee, and happy Friday 13th. We didn't bring that up, but this is a pretty easy bill. It's on the bottom of page 3, House Bill 564 from Health and Human Services. This bill takes just knowing that the issue in the country right now is prescription drug abuse. You know, physicians currently have to have 40 hours of continuing medical education each year. This bill include 5 hours of mandatory training on just this subject of drug abuse and substance abuse, prescriptions, all this around it. And also for the retired physicians, it will add those 5 hours to their CME requirement. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jones.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I bring to you today House Bill 219. It's page 1 under Modified Open. This bill has also become known as the Pool Bill. What this bill does, it adds condominiums as a type of private ownership pool to the list of private ownership pools that are currently not regulated by the Department of Health. So this bill would just add condominiums as one more classification or type of private pool not to be regulated by the Department of Health. Happy to take any questions. It's estimated, too, by the way, that this bill will save the taxpayers over $2 million a year. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Gravely.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. New bill that has shown up on the report this morning, the front page, the last page on the front, the 5th from the bottom, House Bill 494. The substitute reflects a little bit different language here that is stated on the report. The Federal Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act of 2004 allows a retired law enforcement officer in good standing to continue carrying a concealed weapon, provided that that officer qualifies every year with that particular weapon, be it a revolver or a semi-automatic. What this bill would seek to do would be, instead of paying $25 for each qualification, if the officer decides to qualify at the same time with both their revolver and their automatic, it will be just one fee of $25.
Mr. Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Representative Gravely.
Yes, sir.
So what we're doing here is a law enforcement officer who's no longer a law enforcement officer, but he's registered with Post.
Yes, sir.
They don't have to pay the same fee that every other law-abiding citizen would have to pay in order to get a gun carry permit.
Well, what the retired law enforcement officer has is different than a GWCL. Every citizen every 5 years can pay the $80 required to the state with a fingerprint. A retired law enforcement officer who retires in good standing under SR 218 federal law says that if they qualify every year, they can continue to conceal carry in the same places they were able to carry as a law enforcement officer. This does not allow them to purchase firearms, which is what the GWCL could do, or allows regular citizens. Also, officers can also get a GWCL if they choose to do that.
And so this would exempt them from paying the same fee that other law-abiding citizens have to pay.
Well, it's not the same thing that a law-abiding citizen would get. A law-abiding citizen is not eligible to get and qualify with Post every year. They have to qualify and prove their proficiency with the firearm that they're carrying concealed. That they did every year while they were a law enforcement officer.
Is that a yes?
Is that a yes for what? Well, it's different. What you're asking doesn't apply to retired law enforcement officers.
Nothing.
Does Mr. Powell want to tag along with you? Mr. Powell.
I just want to make sure this doesn't involve tacking on, does it?
Absolutely. It's a detacking bill, actually.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mabra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. I bring before you House Bill 531, bottom of the first page, 531, second one up. This bill expands Georgia long-arm statute. Right now, in our law, we state specifically in specific acts in which you can get jurisdiction over a non-resident here in the state of Georgia. The Court of Appeals and the Georgia Supreme Court has stated in numerous cases that we need to get rid of our specific standard and take it up to a general standard that is stated out in International Shoe. Any attorney has learned about this case their first year in law school in civil procedure, as we know as Civ Pro. International Shoe says the standard for getting personal jurisdiction for a non-resident is that you have minimum contacts with the state, one, and two, that the notion of having personal jurisdiction of this person does not offend the notion of fair play and substantial justice. Basically, it doesn't offend the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. And this bill right here takes our standard from the specific acts to a general acts in which we can get long-arm jurisdiction over non-residents and provide more security and provide more protection for our citizens here in the state. Thank you.
Mr. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it true, Mr. Baber, this is taking in compliance with our federal constitution and not in our state law currently we have specific acts and conduct which may authorize the use of what we call the long-arm statute, correct?
That is correct.
And this is a bill that's been supported and came through the State Bar and the Board of Governors for approval?
That is also correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Button.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I ask for your favorable consideration on House Bill 483. It's the fourth bill from the bottom on page 1. House Bill 483 is designating the shoal bass as the official native riverine sports fish. It's approved by the Department of Natural Resources, and the significance of naming this is that it makes the fish program for the Department of Natural Resources eligible for some grants to help promote the fishing industry and hopefully create some more tourism opportunities. You can still eat them if you can catch them.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you mind asking that question? My leader wanted to know, does that mean that we can eat green tree frogs that we did several years ago? Only the legs. Okay. Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm here today to ask for consideration under modified open, page 2, second from the top, House Bill 552 by committee substitute. This bill deals strictly with pure captive insurance companies. A pure captive insurance company only insures its own, for a company in Georgia that only insures its own risks or any risk of a contractually controlled unaffiliated business. So it's completely legal to have one in Georgia now, but we have zero due to the premium tax structure on these entities. Every large company in Georgia typically has self-insurance mechanisms that use these vehicles, but unfortunately they're all domiciled out of state. This is an insurance department requested bill. It would bring jobs and actually some premium tax, be revenue positive to the state of Georgia, bring jobs to the state of Georgia, and also our financial institutions would enjoy the benefit of the increased cash flow. And be happy to answer any questions.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Mr. Waite.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This morning, I ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 54. This is a committee substitute. Page 1, under Modified Open Rule. House Bill 54 provides tuition grants to the children of fallen officers killed in the line of duty. This is a voluntary tax donation through the tax return, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Wait a second. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, is it not true that this is supported by the Sheriff's Association and the Chiefs Association as well as most other law enforcement agencies?
Yes, Chairman Powell, that is true.
Is it also most important that this doesn't cost the taxpayers anything? This is by voluntary donations.
That is correct. That is true.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Powell. Other Mr. Powell.
The donation that the chairman's talking about is a voluntary check off on your income tax return. Is that the way it's done?
That is true.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No more questions, thank you. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. I present to you for the first time this year House Bill 174, middle of page 2, under Modified Structure. You may recall this bill from last year. It's a simple change in the word slum to pockets of blight. It will allow our municipalities to avail themselves to federal urban redevelopment dollars without having to call their entire community a slum. We ask for your consideration on this bill. Is supported by all the members of the Douglas County delegation. Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Members. Mr. Stevens, new bills.
New bill only. House Bill 429 is a pro-life bill. I'm sorry, page 3, halfway down, is the end. If you have an end-of-life scenario where you're given a prognosis of 2 years or less, you cannot be denied a drug if the doctor so deems it necessary.
If you've got a question for the author, raise your hand because I'm lit up here. No questions, thank you. Mr. Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 153. This started out as it's on a modified structure on the second page, about halfway down. House Bill 153. This started out as an unauthorized practice of law bill, and it still has some semblance of that, but this provides a lot of protection for doesn't have anything to do with magistrate judges, clearly. But this provides a remedy in the statute for those who are injured by someone who is practicing law without a license, presenting himself as a lawyer, conducting activities that only a lawyer's license to do, and allows them just to have a remedy to recover for their losses and damages.
I think the leader might have a question for you.
Sir.
Since it's gone through various iterations, is this something that's okay with the real estate community now?
Yes, we've the realtors in support, and I've had realtors calling my office saying, "Thank you for this. This provides us the things that we needed in order to exercise our license."
That's good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
How bad is it going to get beat?
I'm hoping that it won't get beat. I'm hopeful.
Have you got another one?
I would just like to ask for.
If it ain't a new one, don't ask for it.
It's a new one.
All right.
I would like to ask for House Bill 531 on the first page in modified open rule. That's a good bill that Representative Maber is bringing. And also House Bill 358, legislative oversight for state contracts. And that 358, that's on page 3, second from the top.
Mr. Willard.
Well, I was also asked for House Bill 531. That's a good bill. I think we need to let that go forward if we can, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to put my name by House Bill 409. That's the cadaver scans for burn patients. They've been using that 50 years, and when you are a burn patient, you die if you don't get the burn covered up with skin, and synthetic skin is astronomically expensive. And I would also like to ask for House Bill 564. These are on page 3, sorry. And that is one requiring physicians to do at least 5 hours on addiction. We have a terrible addiction problem in our state, and physicians are ordering these prescriptions, and they need to know a little bit more about it than they do.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 4 under structured rule, House Bill 221, this is Brett Harrell's bill. It amends the code to add an additional grounds for valuation of property with rent limitations. It's a simple little amendment to a bill that we passed last year, the year before. And I would also like to ask...
Jay, wait, what number was that last one?
That was 221 on page 4. And Brett Harrell's going to be carrying that. And then I would ask for House Bill 364. David Knight will be carrying that, and it's a method to remove tax assessors who continually insist on imposing illegal assessments on property values.
Yay, where's that?
And the House Bill 364. And then I've got an amendment to House Bill 375 that's on the disc.
Let's do the amendment real quick. On your desk, you've got AM 390106. It's an amendment to a bill that's on the calendar for this morning. Mr. Powell, tell what the amendment does.
Currently, if a vehicle fails a vehicle inspection and emissions inspection, that car cannot be legally driven. This allows for a temporary tag for the period of time while it's being repaired and until it passes an emissions test, but no longer than 30 days.
All right. Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to put my name by House Bill 432. It seems like a common sense way to deal with annexation, de-annexation issues and not create islands. My late understanding is that has absolutely nothing to do, as I believe the author may have mentioned, with any of the more controversial annexation issues that are now pending. Thank you.
Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll, I beg your indulgence. I know we have asked for HB 17 before, but after consulting with someone down on the third floor, way above my pay grade, it was suggested that I ask for the bill again, that it be put on the calendar. So, at the risk of...
I'd be willing to bet he's above everybody's pay grade.
Well, yes, sir. I would suggest that he is.
Okay.
So that's the reason I'm asking for HB 17 to be included on today's calendar.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked for 2 bills that are on page 4 at the top of the page. The first is HB 567, which will allow the Department of Human Services to bring child support enforcement contempt actions in any county in which the non-custodial parent can be found. Today, it is only allowed in the county where the original child support order was entered, and this will help in so many ways to make it easier for the non-custodial parent to understand their obligations, defend themselves in court, and direct all available resources to their children rather than traveling to court or calling that a barrier to the ongoing need.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, A.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 54. It's a good bill for the children of slain law enforcement officers with no cost to the state. Also, I'd like to put my name beside 219, sends a message and cleans up the Department of Health meddling in the affairs of private property owners on the pools. And also Chairman McCall's feral hog bill, which is pretty important to those of us in rural Georgia that's being run slap off our farms.
Ms. Dempsey.
Yes, there is a second measure also on the back of page 4, House Bill 568, which will allow all new child support cases involving children born out of wedlock to go through DNA testing. This will put this measure on the front end of that and be a great solution to dealing with ensuring that the department holds the right person accountable from the beginning, and allowing the department to petition the court to set aside an existing order if a DNA test excludes the person as the biological parent.
Okay. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to ask you on page 3 to support Chairman McCall's HB 475, the feral hog bill, which is a terrible problem. It's not becoming one. It already is in our state, and this is a step that we've worked out with Game and Fish, with DNR to make sure that we address the problem in a reasonable way. Ask for your support on it.
Mr. Burns, do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir, I do, Mr. Chairman.
It's AM 370271.
That is it to HB 84 that was presented earlier by Chairman Chokas. It's just some corrections in the language that helps bring some clarity as to how the policies work that affect this issue with our aircraft.
Thank you. Mr. Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, middle of the first page, HB 271, great bill to help bring in jobs and educate young people.
That's already, we got it. Do new ones.
And I'd like to, once again, put my name next to Representative Dudgeon's study committee, the Joint Study Committee on Cybersecurity.
Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to place my name by HB 409. I think everybody remembers when Savannah had the horrible fire, and most of those people came to the Augusta Burn Center, and frozen cadaver skin was used. Thank you so much.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to place my name beside HB 54 on the modified open rules, Representative Waite's bill.
Okay. Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 470, the pharmacy bill that was not on the sheet yesterday. This is the one that's looking at the MAC pricing, making sure we're fair with our local pharmacists, also updating the audit bill of rights, making sure that they're treated fairly. And for the first time, this puts the PBMs up under the insurance commissioner such that there's a third party that our independent pharmacists can go to when these rules are broken.
Good bill. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. New bill on page 3, down next to the bottom is House Bill 537, dealing with Medicaid, dental Medicaid for children, involving case management organizations. This is a dental carve-out where the department would administer a single administrator across the state rather than the 3 case management organizations.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name by House Bill 230 and ask for consideration by Representative Hughley. Thank you.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 230, the Claims Advisory Board bill. What this does is outlines a simple process for us when we have persons who've been wrongfully convicted. I also would like to put my name by Ms. Buckner's bill, House Bill 483 on page 1.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Modified open, page 1, HB 531, the long-arm statute bill brought by Mr. Mabra. On page 2, modified structure, HB 174, the blight bill brought by Representative Jones, which successfully passed out of this House last year. And also on page 3, modified structure, HB 417, the flashing beacons bill by Representative Fry, which would enhance the safety of students not only in Athens but also in downtown Atlanta.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, near the top, House Bill 370. House Bill 370 does about 3 things, dealing with elections and filings with the Ethics Commission. Mr. Chairman, most people are familiar from their local officials with the problems that were caused when we required city and county officials to electronically file with the Ethics Commissions for their campaigns. It created a huge backlog of problems and overwhelmed the systems, which have been confirmed by the Georgia Department of Audits. This bill allows authority to the Ethics Commission to deal with those backlogging problems and, when necessary, eliminate fines. Also contained in there, once we give this period for cleanup, if you don't have yourself straight with the Ethics Commission, you can't qualify to run for office, and that applies to everybody in the state of Georgia, not just local officials. In there also is a provision which eliminates a middleman involved with party caucus, House and Senate party caucus donations. Right now, we all know that the House and Senate caucuses can donate unlimited amounts to people running for the legislature, but you have to run that through a middleman. You send it to the party, and then they send it back down. This would simply eliminate the middleman. And finally, in there is a transparency provision, which these so-called independent expenditure groups, or sometimes referred to as dark money groups, would have to now fall under the same provisions as you and I do. They would have to show who is donating to them and report as well their expenditures.
Okay, Ms. Cooper, you've got an amendment on it's AM 331531.
Yes, sir. That's on House Bill 505, which is the PT bill. It's just making sure that patients that go... I'm sorry. This is on House Bill 505, and it's just making sure that when a physical therapist independently treats a patient, that the patient is told that their insurance company may or may not pay for it, for the treatment.
Okay. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HB 54 and also HB 409 and HB 475, where the hogs serve no purpose. talk about that. No, not even good pork chops, man.
Okay. All right. First thing we're going to do is the amendments. The first one is AM 370271 on House Bill 84. Mr. Burns' amendment. Do you move, Mr. Burns? Is there any opposition? All right, that amendment, if 84 makes the supplemental calendar, that amendment will be on it. Then you have AM 390106. It's an amendment to House Bill 375, which is on there today. Wait.
Not, don't we have this bill currently on the blue sheet?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Like to get Mr. Gravely's bill on there. Wherever he is, that's his bill. All right. It'll be on there. All right. The other amendment you have is AM 331531. It's on House Bill 505. And again, if 505 makes the calendar, that amendment will be on it. Any opposition? What we're here this morning to do is set a calendar for Wednesday. I think, Mr. Leader, we're going to come in a little late on Wednesday. Not yet. She's got to fix it. Okay, good. All right, under open rule, HR 106. Any opposition? Under open rule, HR 303. Any opposition? Under open modified structure, HR 397. Mr. Leader, you want to move? Under modified structure, SB 93. Any opposition? It's on. I will let you know that there could be a late addition to that calendar, but right now that is the calendar. The addition would be made in the supplemental rules. When we have supplemental rules, remember the rule. Don't line up on that wall. I will see you around lunch.